On the day I turned 20, my parents sold off my entire collection of precious tools to cover my brother's college expenses. When I confronted my father about selling away my dreams, his response cut deep. "This is my house, and you're living under my roof." That very evening, I walked out without uttering a single word. The following morning, my father stormed into the backyard only to discover the workshop I'd built was completely stripped bare. Now he's beginning to realize he's just made the biggest mistake of his entire life. This is where the real story kicks off. And trust me, you won't want to miss what unfolds next. Make sure you're subscribed to catch every moment. We're always curious about where you're watching from today. Drop us a comment and let us know. The morning had started with a relentless pounding headache, a familiar companion after putting in a grueling 60-hour work week. It was my 20th birthday, though we'd postponed any celebration. My older brother, Daniel, had a critical exam coming up, and my father, Richard, was adamant that we shouldn't create any distractions for him. I didn't mind much. All I craved was a quiet evening, a warm cup of tea, and a few peaceful hours in my workshop. My workshop was my sanctuary. It wasn't just that dusty, cobweb-filled storage room that came with the house. It was a pristine, fully insulated, climate-controlled space that I'd constructed myself, board by board, over 3 long years. It was the place where I stopped being a disappointment and became a luthier. It was where I created things that could truly sing. I pushed open the door, anticipating the sweet, familiar scent of rosewood and spruce. Instead, I was met with silence and the faint smell of sawdust lingering in the air. The room was empty. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered, flipping on the overhead light. All that greeted me was the sterile hum of the fluorescent bulb illuminating an empty space. My German workbench had disappeared. My humidity cabinet was gone. My wall-mounted tool panel was stripped bare. And the tools, dear God, the tools. My hand-polished Japanese chisels, my specialized router jigs, my grandfather's irreplaceable 1950s hand planes. Everything had vanished. The entire space had been cleaned out. A cold, sickening feeling washed over me, far worse than any headache. I ran back toward the house, my boots echoing against the wooden floor. My parents, Richard and Margaret, along with my brother Daniel, were sitting around the dinner table, laughing at something on Daniel's laptop. "Where are my tools?" The laughter stopped abruptly. My father, Richard, glanced up with an expression of indifference. He carefully wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Oh, Isabella, good. We were wondering when you'd notice." "Notice?" My voice was shaking. "The storage room is completely empty. Where's my workshop? Where is everything?" My mother, Margaret, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, refusing to meet my eyes. She just kept fidgeting with a loose thread on the placemat. Daniel, always the golden child, sighed with dramatic annoyance, as if I'd interrupted his favorite television program. "We sold them," Richard stated, his voice as flat and matter-of-fact as the insurance claims he processed every single day. "Got a fantastic price for the lot. Everything went to a collector. This afternoon." I couldn't process the words he was saying. "You sold everything? My workbench? Grandfather's tools?" "Don't be so dramatic, Isabella," Richard said, taking a sip of water. "They're just tools. You don't need them right now. Everything went into the family fund." Daniel's final year of law school is running more expensive than we anticipated, and this was a logical way to cover the difference. The family fund, a mythical bank account that, throughout its entire existence, had only ever funded one person. Daniel. My wages from part-time work, my savings, and now, apparently, my entire future. Everything had gone into the family fund. "You sold my future," I whispered, the reality of it crushing my chest. Those weren't just tools. That was my career, my apprenticeship. Some of them were one-of-a-kind pieces from Grandpa. Richard's face hardened. This was the part he enjoyed, the part where he got to play patriarch. "Your hobby wasn't paying any bills, Isabella. Daniel's career will pay. You're 20 years old. You can get new tools. You're part of this family, and you need to contribute." Contribute? I was shouting now, tears of shock transforming into hot fury. I have been contributing. I work 40 hours a week at the workshop and another 20 at the diner to pay for those tools. You had no right whatsoever. I have every right, he thundered, rising to his feet. The chair scraped violently across the floor. You live under my roof. You eat my food. Everything you think you own falls under my authority until you're self-sufficient. And this fantasy of building guitars isn't self-sufficiency. The words hung in the air, cold and final. My mother flinched but said nothing. Daniel just kept scrolling through his phone, ostentatiously ignoring the detonation of my life. You live under my roof. It wasn't a statement. It was a cage. He'd used that phrase to control my choices, my time, my money for years. He saw me as a failed investment because I chose a technical craft instead of a 4-year degree that he couldn't even afford anyway. He viewed my passion as a liability. I looked at his arrogant, smug face. I looked at my mother's deliberate ignorance. I looked at my brother's profound indifference. And in that single terrible moment, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. It transformed from molten grief into cold, sharp steel. "All right," I said. My voice was suddenly calm, so calm it surprised even me. Richard blinked, expecting more screaming. "All right, fine. I'm glad you've finally come to your senses." He sat back down, picking up his fork. "Now your mother made lasagna. Sit down and eat. We can talk about buying you some basic tools at the hardware store next week." I didn't move. I just stared at him. He had sold my past and my future for a few $1,000s to support his perfect son. He thought he'd taken everything. He thought he'd won. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm not hungry." I turned my back, climbed the stairs to my room, and locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled my suitcase out from under the bed. I didn't know it yet, but my father had just handed me the key to my own cage. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that it was almost clarifying. It was worse than any argument, worse than any punishment. It was a fundamental rejection of who I was, and it would be the last one I'd accept. The first hour in my room was a vacuum. The shock ran so deep that my body went numb, a defense mechanism against the scale of the violation. I sat on the edge of the bed with the suitcase at my feet and just stared. I saw the cheap particle board desk my father had forced me to keep, the powder blue walls my mother had chosen. This room had never been mine. Not really. It was just a cell, a place where I could sleep while my real life existed in that back room. And they sold it all. They invited a stranger into my space, my private, sacred world, and let them take my life piece by piece while I was at work. They sold my grandfather's tools, the ones he'd placed in my hands when I was 10 years old, his calloused fingers guiding mine over the smooth curve of a violin body. They sold the custom temperature gauge I'd saved 6 months to purchase. They sold my dream for the price of a used car. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Daniel. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A text message. "Daniel, Dad's angry. Just come downstairs and apologize so we can have a normal evening. You're ruining your own birthday." Ruining? I almost laughed. It was a cold, cutting sound in the silent room. My birthday. They had done this on my birthday. The cruelty of it was almost artistic. A gentle knock came at the door. "Isabella, sweetheart, please open the door." My mother's voice, soft, pleading, and completely useless. "Go away, Mom. Don't be like this," she said, her voice whiny. "Your father is just trying to do what's best for the family. You know how much pressure he's under with Daniel's tuition. He didn't mean to hurt you." "He didn't mean to hurt?" I stood up, hands clenched. "He sold thousands of dollars worth of property that was mine without my permission. That's not hurting me, Mom. That's theft." "Oh, don't use that word," she hissed, her voice suddenly sharp. "That's a terrible, ugly word, Isabella. We're a family. It's all family money. You'll understand when you're older. Now please come out of there. You're making a scene, and Daniel needs to study." Daniel? It was always Daniel. Daniel, the 23-year-old law student, the golden boy, the sun around which our entire family orbit revolved. His future was the only one that mattered. His needs were the only real ones. My future, The one I was building with my own 2 hands, the one where I was already succeeding, was just a fantasy because it involved sawdust and calluses instead of courtrooms and briefcases. "I'm not coming out," I said, my voice flat. There was a long, frustrated sigh from the other side of the door. "Fine," she said in a martyred tone. "Stay in there and sulk, but you're only hurting yourself. Your father is a practical man, Isabella. You know he did what needed to be done." The footsteps faded away. I was alone again. I looked at my phone. A new message from Daniel. "Daniel, whatever. If you're going to act like a baby, I'm heading to the library. Don't ruin Dad's mood more than you already have. I need him to co-sign a new loan." My blood ran cold. A new loan. So the sale of my tools hadn't even been enough. It was just a drop in the ocean. They'd burned my future as kindling, and were already looking for the next forest to clear cut. I stood up and began packing my bags, not with the frantic panic of an escape, but with the methodical precision of a planned demolition. I packed my clothes, my toiletries, the few books I owned, and the small tin box that held my birth certificate and passport. My father, Richard, was a practical man. My mother, Margaret, was his accomplice. My brother, Daniel, was the black hole they fed. They were a closed system, and I was the only movable piece they could liquidate. Richard believed he'd taken everything of value. He'd sold my tools, my workbenches, my machines. In his mind, the case was closed. He'd converted a hobby into cash and solved his problem. But as I zipped up the suitcase, a slow, cold smile touched my lips. My father, the practical insurance adjuster, was an expert at assessing the value of things he could see. A car, a house, a toolbox. He saw the world in dollar signs and depreciation schedules. But he was an amateur. He was sloppy. He'd walked into my workshop, grabbed the obvious, shiny things, and never looked deeper. He'd left the most valuable items behind. They sold the tools, yes, but they forgot about the wood. They forgot about the massive, carefully curated stacks of rare woods I kept hidden in a false bottom compartment beneath the floorboards I'd installed myself. They didn't know the difference between a pine slat and a 50-year-old Brazilian rosewood plank of master quality. They didn't know that the scraps I'd been curing for 5 years were worth more than all the tools combined. They forgot what I was capable of building. And they forgot who taught me. They forgot about Thomas. I grabbed my phone. It wasn't my brother or my mother I was calling. I dialed my mentor's number, the man who'd been more of a father to me than Richard ever was. "Thomas," I said, my voice steady, "I need your help, and I need your truck. My father just sold my tools." There was a pause, and then a low, dangerous voice on the other end. "He what?" "I'm on my way." My father, Richard, always said he respected hard work, but what he meant was a paycheck. I get it. Your passion for luthiery was, in his eyes, a fanciful waste of time. You get splinters, he'd say. I get quarterly bonuses. See the difference? He was an insurance adjuster, a man who spent his days assigning monetary values to other people's tragedies. He was practical to the point of cruelty and saw no return on investment in my craft. My brother Daniel was the opposite. He was Richard's prized racehorse. Daniel was 23, enrolled in a prestigious law school, and possessed a natural charm that made people want to give him things. The family fund was established the day he received his acceptance letter. From that moment on, all the family's financial gravity orbited around him. My mother, Margaret, took on extra administrative work from home, her fingers flying across the keyboard to pay for his textbooks. My father canceled his fishing trips and postponed house repairs, all to ensure Daniel's tuition was paid on time. And me? I was the family's secondary revenue stream. My journey into luthiery wasn't a hobby. It was an inheritance. My grandfather, my mother's father, had been a luthier in Europe. He was a quiet, meticulous man who smelled of varnish and sawdust. When I was 10, he placed his smallest chisel in my hand and said, "The wood already knows what it wants to be, Isabella. You just need to listen." He passed away 2 years later, leaving me his entire chest of tools. They were smooth from decades of use by his hands, stained by 60 years of work. They were priceless. To my father, They were just old junk in a box. When I started my apprenticeship with Thomas, the most respected luthier in the state, Richard was baffled. "You're going to be a workshop assistant for minimum wage when you could be getting a business degree?" He didn't understand that minimum wage was just the beginning. I worked 40 hours a week for Thomas, learning the art. Then I'd go to a diner and work another 20 hours, waiting tables to save money. Every dollar went toward my future. I bought a second-hand lathe. I saved for a year to purchase a professional bandsaw. I spent months constructing my workshop in that storage room, insulating it, doing the wiring, installing a complex humidity system to protect the delicate woods. My family saw none of this. They just saw the storage room door closing. When I'd come home exhausted and covered in sawdust, my mother would sigh. "I just wish you'd spend more time with us, Isabella. Your brother is home this weekend." Can't you be normal for one night? Normal? To them, normal meant contributing to the bottomless pit of Daniel's ambition. Last year, when Daniel needed a top-of-the-line laptop for his intensive studies, Richard suggested I sell my car. It was an old beat-up sedan, but it was my car, what I used to get to both my jobs. "It's just practical, Isabella," Richard explained as if I were a child. "Daniel needs this for his career. You can take the bus. It's a small sacrifice for the family." I fought hard, but Margaret wore me down. "Please, honey, don't upset your father. It's just for a little while. Think of how proud we'll be when Daniel becomes a lawyer." I gave in. I sold the car. Daniel got the laptop. I started taking the bus, adding 2 hours of commuting to my already brutal days. And Daniel? He used the laptop to watch basketball games and day trade stocks, something he was learning in an expensive elective course. This was the pattern. My sacrifices were practical. Daniel's privileges were investments. Now, sitting on the bed with my packed suitcase, I understood the full, ugly truth. My father didn't just resent my hobby. He resented me. He resented that I was building a life that didn't revolve around him. He resented that I had a passion he couldn't quantify or control. And most of all, he resented that I had something of value that he could take. Selling my tools wasn't a last resort. It was a power play. It was his way of reminding me who was in charge, that my dreams were disposable, and that my only practical value was serving as a resource for his golden child. He ripped out the heart of my world to pawn it for his son's comfort. He thought he was teaching me a lesson in practicality. He thought he was showing me who was boss. But all he did was confirm what I'd suspected for a long time. In this house, I wasn't a daughter. I was collateral. The headlights of a large truck swept across my bedroom wall. Thomas was here. I opened the suitcase, grabbed the small tin box, and pulled out my house key. I went downstairs. The house was quiet. My parents were in the living room, the murmur of the television serving as familiar background noise. Daniel was probably still at the library, blissfully oblivious to the fact that his future was now being financed by the theft of mine. I placed the key on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I left a simple, single note. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it with the cold, clear precision of one of my grandfather's chisels. "You sold my tools. I kept my future. Don't contact me." I walked out the back door, closing it softly behind me. I didn't look back. I climbed into Thomas's truck cabin. The smell of sawdust and old coffee was a welcome comfort. "He's going to regret this," Thomas said, his voice a low growl. He put the truck in gear. "I know," I said. "Let's go. We have work to do." The anger only hit me when we were on the highway. It came in a sudden, blinding wave, so intense it made me shake. It wasn't the hot, loud anger I'd felt in the dining room. This was cold, crystalline fury. It was the fury of someone who'd been violated, betrayed. But beneath it, something new was forming. Determination. "He didn't just sell the tools, Thomas," I said, my voice tight. "He sold the workbenches, the router table I built from scratch, the ventilation system, the dehumidifier. He let a stranger dismantle my life." Thomas gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and hands that looked like weathered leather. He was a master craftsman who'd seen my potential from day one. He'd become the father Richard never was. "He's a fool, Isabella," Thomas said. "A destructive, ignorant fool. But he's also careless." "What did he miss?" "Everything," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "He missed everything that matters." We stopped at a 24-hour equipment rental yard. "I need a 5-meter box truck," Thomas told the sleepy attendant, "and 2 heavy-duty cargo dollies." He paid in cash. An hour later, we were parked 2 streets away from my house. "I can't let them see your truck," I explained. "We're going to need more people," Thomas said, looking at the dark house. "That's a lot of weight." "I know," I replied. I called in some favors. At that moment, 2 more cars pulled up. It was 3 guys from the local Woodworkers Association, friends of mine and Thomas's. They were big, capable men, and after hearing a 30-second version of the story, they were quietly furious. "We work in silence," I said, handing out gloves to everyone. "We park around the corner. We don't use the front door. We go through the side gate, straight to the storage room. We take everything." For the next 3 hours, we operated like a ghost team. We backed the truck through the alley, killing the engine. We used the dollies to move the heavy pieces. Our movements were practiced and silent. First, my 2 remaining industrial workbenches, the ones Richard hadn't seen because they were in the dirty section of the workshop. Then my drill press and the bandsaw, which had been hidden under a tarp. And then the grand prize. I knelt by the back wall and used a crowbar to pry up 3 floorboards I'd installed. Beneath them was a shallow, lead-lined space with perfectly controlled humidity. And inside was my treasure. It was my collection of rare woods. To a layman like my father, it was just a pile of boards. To a luthier, it was a bank vault. There were 30 master-quality spruce sets aged for 10 years. There were several blocks of curly maple, a dozen sets of Indian rosewood, and in a special case, 3 sets of pre-ban Brazilian rosewood. That wood alone was worth more than Daniel's entire college education. I'd been curing this, saving it for the day when I'd have enough skill to use it. One by one, we passed the planks, handling them more carefully than most people handle crystal. We loaded the truck, stacking everything with professional care. We took the shelves they sat on. We took the leftover insulation panels. We reclaimed my workshop. By 4 a.m, the storage room was an empty shell. It was exactly as it had been when my parents moved in. An empty, useless box. We drove to Thomas's workshop, a large, beautiful barn 30 kilometers away. We unloaded everything into a spacious, secure storage area. When the last piece went in, the sun was beginning to paint the sky pink. The guys from the association, true heroes, just nodded, accepted my whispered, emotional thanks, and drove off into the dawn. Thomas put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're safe here, Isabella. There's an apartment above the workshop. It's yours for as long as you need it." "Thank you, Thomas," I whispered, exhaustion and adrenaline finally weighing heavy. "Now," he said, handing me a mug of hot coffee from a thermos, "let's find your tools." This was a clever trap. My father, Richard, was an adjuster. He knew how to liquidate assets, but he wasn't an expert. He didn't know the Lutherie community. It's a small, tight-knit world. There are only a handful of dealers in the region who would even know what those tools were, let alone have the money to buy them. At 8 o'clock sharp, Thomas and I were in his office with a list of phone numbers. "You call the pawn shops," he said. "Ask about musical instrument tools. I'll call the dealers. I'll start with Harrington." Harrington Fine Instruments was the largest and most reputable dealer in the region. Mr. Harrington and Thomas had a 30-year history of friendly rivalry and mutual respect. I spent an hour getting nowhere with pawnshop owners who had no idea what a handplane was. When I was hanging up with another confused manager, I heard Thomas's voice in the other room. His tone suddenly turned cold as iron. "What, Michael?" He said the daughter gave up the hobby. Yes, it's her." "No, she's right here. She's my apprentice." "He told you it was his to sell?" "I see, Michael. That man didn't just sell you his daughter's tools. He sold you stolen merchandise. The grandfather's collection was in that lot. They're irreplaceable." There was a long pause. I held my breath. "I understand your position," Thomas said. his voice icy. And you understand mine? This man, Richard, committed fraud. He defrauded you and stole from my apprentice. No, I don't want you to call the police. Not yet. I have a better idea. Tell me, Michael, when is he coming in to sign the final consignment papers? Tomorrow morning. I erupted. I was in the apartment above Thomas's workshop, which was rapidly becoming my new home. It was small, but the whole place smelled of aged wood and varnish, a scent that felt safer than anywhere I'd ever lived. My phone, which I'd left on silent, was lit up like a Christmas tree. 15 missed calls from Mom. 8 from Richard. A string of increasingly hysterical messages from Daniel. Daniel 7:30 am. Where are you? Mom's having a panic attack. Daniel 7:45 am. Seriously, Isabella, this isn't funny. Dad just went to the storage room. He's going to call the police. You better get back here and return his stuff. Daniel 7:52 am. His stuff, Isabella. This is theft. Daniel 8:15 am. Mom's crying. You've really crossed the line this time. You're the most selfish person I've ever met. Dad's going to your little workshop to talk to your boss. The last message made my blood run cold. I ran downstairs. Thomas, my father's coming here. Thomas was on the phone, his expression grim. He held up a hand, silencing me. Michael, he's coming to my workshop now. He thinks Isabella's here. Perfect. Let him come. Saves us a trip. Stay where you are. I'll handle this. He hung up and looked at me. Michael Harrington is on his way. He's not happy at all. Seems your father didn't just sell your tools. He also sold my Festool sander that you'd borrowed. He committed fraud against a man who buys and sells businesses for a living. Your father is spectacular. At that moment, a car screeched to a halt in the gravel driveway. My father's gray sedan. Richard got out of the car, his face a mask of righteous fury. He marched toward the workshop, saw me in the doorway, and pointed his finger. You, he roared. You think this is a game? Think you can steal from me? I'm pressing charges, Isabella. You emptied my storage room. That's theft of my property. Thomas stepped out from behind me, wiping his hands on a rag. He was much taller than my father, and strong as the oak he worked with. Richard, I presume, Thomas said, his voice a calm rumble. My father hesitated, his bravado shrinking before this imposing stranger. Who are you? I'm Thomas, he said, Isabella's mentor. And you're on my property yelling at my apprentice. You need to lower your voice. I won't lower anything, Richard sputtered, recovering a fraction of courage. She stole my wood, my workbenches. I'm here to take them back. Your wood? I asked, stepping forward. My voice was ice. You mean the 50-year-old Brazilian rosewood sets or the master-quality spruce? Tell me, Dad, what exactly were you planning to do with them? Build a birdhouse? Richard's face went white. He had no idea what I was talking about. It's wood. It was in my storage room. It was in my workshop, I corrected. The one I built with my own money. The wood I purchased with my own wages. You can't sell my future and keep my inventory. He was losing control. His narrative was unraveling. You live under my roof. That makes everything my property. It's the law. Is it? A new voice cut in. A black Mercedes quietly pulled into the property. A man in a well-tailored suit stepped out of the car. It was Michael Harrington. He looked calm, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Mr. Richard? Harrington asked, though it wasn't really a question. Yes, my father said, puffing out his chest, sensing a potential ally. This girl, my daughter, she stole... Mr. Richard, Harrington interrupted, his voice like steel coated in silk. My name is Michael Harrington. You visited my showroom yesterday. You sold me a collection of luthiery tools. A flash of panic crossed Richard's face. This wasn't going as planned. I did. A beautiful sale. My daughter, as I said, she gave up the hobby. How interesting, Harrington said, moving closer. Because Isabella here is one of the most promising apprentices in the state, and her boss, Thomas, is a longtime friend of mine. What's also interesting is that the collection you sold me contained several family heirloom tools that belonged to Isabella's grandfather. which she can prove. And it also contained a $6,000 sander that belongs to Thomas, which he can also prove. Richard turned a pale gray. "You lied to me, Mr. Richard," Harrington said, his voice dangerously pleasant. "You walked into my establishment and sold me stolen goods. That's fraud. That's a crime. My father's first instinct was to attack, not Harrington, but me. You set me up," he screamed, pointing at me. "This is your fault. You're trying to destroy me." "You did an excellent job of that yourself," Thomas said, crossing his arms. I'll return the money," Richard stammered, looking at Harrington. "It's a misunderstanding. A family matter." "We're well past misunderstanding," Harrington said. "I paid you $125,000 for that collection, which I just discovered is worth nearly double that. Which means you're as stupid as you are criminal. But I'm not a man who likes complications. I want my $125,000 back. Now." "Now?" I can't," Richard said, eyes wide. "It's in the family fund. It's for my son's college. It's already allocated." "That," Harrington said, pulling out his phone, "sounds like your problem. I, on the other hand, am about to have a solution called calling the police." "No!" Richard shouted. The panic was real. "No police. Please, no. I need to make a call. I can transfer it. I just need a day." Harrington looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at me. "He doesn't get a day," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I didn't get a day. I didn't even get a warning. He returns the money now." My father stared at me, his eyes filled with such pure hatred it took my breath away. He'd been cornered. The patriarch, the man in charge, had been caught by his own practical little theft. "Fine," he hissed, pulling out his phone and opening the banking app. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type. "You've ruined this family, Isabella. I hope you're happy. You just stole your brother's future." The irony was so vast I almost choked. "No, Dad," I said as he furiously transferred the funds. "I just saved mine." The $125,000 disappeared from my father's account with a digital tap. Michael Harrington's phone beeped. He checked it, nodded once, and pocketed it. "A pleasure doing business with you, Richard," he said, the tone dripping with sarcasm. "The tools will be delivered back to this address," he gestured to Thomas's workshop, "within the hour. If you ever, and I mean ever, set foot in my showroom again, I will have you arrested for trespassing." He gave a polite nod to Thomas and me, got in the Mercedes, and drove away. My father stood in the gravel driveway, vibrating with impotent rage I'd never seen. He was a deflated bully, his authority stripped away. He opened his mouth, probably to unleash one last barrage of insults. I just raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't say another word. Get in your car and go home. Isabella, you don't understand what you've done," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That was everything. And the $125,000 you took for my tools was my entire future," I shot back. "We're not the same. You did this to teach me a lesson. Well, lesson learned. Now get off Thomas's property." He stared at me like I was a stranger. The daughter he thought he could crush was gone. In her place stood someone he didn't recognize and, more importantly, someone he couldn't control. He got in the car, slammed the door, and peeled out, raising a cloud of dust. When he was gone, my knees finally buckled. Thomas caught me. "I've got you, Isabella. It's over." Did he really do that?" I whispered, reality settling in. "He sold everything." "Sold?" Thomas said, guiding me inside the workshop. "But we're getting it all back. And most importantly, you're free." The rest of the day was a blur. Harrington's delivery truck arrived. My tools, my workbenches, my grandfather's precious wooden case. It was all there. I spent hours just touching them, inventorying them with tears of relief streaming down my face. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. But the real damage was just beginning. My phone, which had been quiet during the confrontation, exploded. This time it wasn't my mother. It was Daniel. I answered. putting it on speaker. "What did you do?" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "What did you do, Isabella?" "I got my tools back, Daniel," I said calmly, buffing a chisel. "My tuition, the payment got declined. The entire family fund is empty. Dad said you tricked him. You had him arrested." "I didn't have anyone arrested, though I could have," I said. "He was forced to return the money he stole from me. He sold my property to a legitimate dealer under false pretenses. That's called fraud, Daniel. You're a law student. You should know this." "But that was my money," he stammered. "That was for my future. You ruined me. I'm going to be expelled. All because of your stupid guitars." There it was, the entitlement, raw and exposed. The belief that his future was the only one that mattered. That mine was just a hobby that could be liquidated for his convenience. "My stupid guitars are my life, Daniel," I said, my voice hardening. "A life I've been building while you coast. Want a future? Get a job. I've had 2 since I was 16. You can start by selling that laptop I paid for." He was speechless. The idea of him working was so foreign, so offensive, it short-circuited his brain. "Goodbye, Daniel." "Isabella, wait. Don't hang up. You have to fix this. Talk to Dad. Tell him to sell something else. Sell your wood. That's worth money, right? Dad said you stole all his wood." I hung up. I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's. And finally, I blocked my father's. The silence in the workshop was absolute. It was just me, my tools, and the smell of wood. But the fight still wasn't completely over. That evening, as Thomas and I were closing up, my mother's car pulled into the driveway. She got out looking fragile and terrified. I met her at the door, blocking her entry. "Isabella, please," she begged, her eyes red from crying. "You have to come home. Your father, he's a broken man. Daniel, he's beside himself, locked in his room. This is tearing us apart." "It's not this that's tearing you apart, Mom," I said, my heart aching with a sadness deeper than anger. "You've been torn apart for years. I just stopped letting you stitch it back together using pieces of me." "But he's your father," she cried, as if that explained everything. "He loves you. He just makes mistakes. He's practical. That's all. He didn't understand. He didn't want to understand," I said. "He understood I had something of value, and he took it. And you stood by and let him. You told me to be nice and not make a scene while he was selling my grandfather's legacy. I didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't ask," I corrected. "You never asked. You just told me to be quiet and think of Daniel. I'm tired of thinking of Daniel. I'm tired of being quiet." "What are we going to do?" she sobbed. "Daniel's college. Your father. He's so ashamed he can't face anyone." "That's not my problem anymore, Mom," I said, and it was the hardest sentence I'd ever spoken. "You all need to figure out how to live without me as your emergency fund. I'm sure Daniel will make a great lawyer if he can figure out how to pay for it. Maybe Dad can sell his golf clubs." She flinched as if I'd struck her. Apparently that was a forbidden line. "You've changed, Isabella," she said, her voice going cold. "You've become hard." "No, Mom," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I'm not hard. I'm just finally done. Goodbye." I closed the workshop door, turned the lock, and walked away, leaving her alone in the driveway. A week passed. It was the most peaceful week of my life. I moved my things into the apartment above the workshop. Thomas, seeing my renewed grit and focus, officially promoted me from apprentice to junior luthier with a corresponding raise. For the first time, I was breathing air that wasn't loaded with resentment and obligation. My family, however, was imploding. I knew this because Thomas had a friend who was a member of the same golf club as my parents. The gossip was apparently spectacular. Richard hadn't been seen at the club in days. Daniel, rumor had it, had been forced to take a leave of absence from law school for the semester and was, to the horror of the entire community, working as a barista. The family fund wasn't just empty. It was in the negative. The $125,000 I'd forced Richard to return was, it seemed, the last penny of their liquid savings. The sale of my tools had been an act of pure desperation, a final, unethical cash grab to keep the illusion of the perfect family running. I felt a pang of something. Not guilt, but a deep, hollow sadness. They'd destroyed themselves. The climax didn't come in a public confrontation. It was something much quieter and, in its own way, much more devastating. It was a Saturday. I was in the workshop sketching the design for a new guitar, finally using the Brazilian rosewood I'd been saving for so long. The front bell rang. I looked up, and my heart stopped. It was Daniel. He looked terrible. His expensive, styled hair was a mess. He was wearing his new barista uniform, a sickly green polo with a coffee stain on the collar. He looked exhausted and, for the first time in his life, small. "Isabella," he said. He didn't sound angry. He just sounded empty. "Daniel," I said, putting down my pencil. "You shouldn't be here." "I know. Thomas let me in. He's outside." He looked around the workshop at the rows of tools hung neatly on the walls, at the beautiful instruments in various states of completion. This is really incredible. It's the work of my life," I said simply. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. I didn't understand. I just thought, I don't know what I thought. I just knew I had a path and you were just there. I was never just there, Daniel. I was working harder than you most days. I see that now," he said. He looked at his own hands, soft and unmarked, then at mine, covered in calluses and small cuts. I'm sorry, Isabella." I stared at him. I'd been prepared for more yelling, for more demands, for more entitlement. I'd never, in 20 years, been prepared for an apology. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time his voice broke. I was an idiot. I was a spoiled, entitled idiot. I just took and never saw what you were giving up. I never saw you. Tears were rolling down his face, and they weren't crocodile tears of a child who'd been caught. They were real. When the tuition payment bounced, he continued, "I thought my life was over. I screamed at you, screamed at Dad, screamed at Mom. And then Dad finally told me." "Told you what?" "Everything. That the family fund wasn't a fund. It was just his salary and your salary, that he'd been covering my rent, my car payments, my bar tabs, everything. That he'd cashed out his entire retirement plan 2 years ago to keep me in school. That he was going to lose the house. The air left my lungs. Lose the house. He sold your tools because the bank was about to start foreclosure proceedings next month," Daniel whispered. "He needed the $125,000, not for my tuition, but for the mortgage. He lied. He lied to Harrington, lied to me, lied to you. He used my tuition as a cover story to hide his own catastrophic failure. He sacrificed my future, not for his son's future, but to hide his own shame. Daniel was sobbing now, an ugly, full cry. "I was so stupid. I told him he had to fix it, that he had to tell you." The bell rang again. My father walked in. He looked 10 years older. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale. He was no longer the loud patriarch. He was just a small, defeated man. He looked at me, at Daniel, then at the floor. "He's right, Isabella," Richard said, his voice barely audible. "It was for the house. I made a mess of everything. I was so obsessed with Daniel being successful, with looking successful, that I bankrupted us. And I violated you in the worst way." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a bundle. I couldn't get everything back," he said. "The dealer had already sold this. I had to buy it back from the new owner. I had to sell my car." He poured the contents into his palm. It was my grandfather's tools, the small, worn-by-use chisels, the hand planes. "I'm sorry, Isabella," he said, holding them out. His hand was trembling. "It's not enough, but it's what I could do." I looked at the tools. I looked at my brother watching me with desperate hope. I looked at my father. a man who'd built his entire identity on pride, and who now stood before me completely broken. This was the climax. Not a public humiliation, but a private, devastating confession. The family fund was a lie. The golden child was an accessory. The practical man was a fraud. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and took the tools from his hand. My fingers closed around the familiar wooden handles of my grandfather's tools. They felt warm, like a piece of my past returning. "Thank you," I said. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the silent workshop. Richard seemed to shrink. "Isabella," he started. "I'm going to pay you back. The $125,000. I'm getting a second job at night." "Dad," Daniel said, wiping his face. To him, he looked at me. "We're not here to ask for anything. He had to return this, and I had to apologize." I looked at both of them, the man who'd almost destroyed me and the boy who'd let him. They were different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by raw humility. This wasn't a happily ever after moment. A lifetime of resentment and betrayal couldn't be erased by an apology. Trust wasn't just broken. It was pulverized. "I'm glad you're working, Daniel," I said, turning to him. "It's good for you. Maybe you'll understand what it takes to build something." I paused, weighing my next words carefully. "I'm not ready to forgive either of you. What you did was unforgivable. You didn't just take my tools. You took my trust, my security, my place in this family." Daniel nodded, tears still streaming. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I was, and what you were building. And I'm sorry." Richard stepped forward, his voice cracking. "Isabella, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed something that can't be rebuilt. But I need you to know that I see it too. I see what I did to you, and it's eating me alive." I looked at my father, really looked at him. For the first time in my life, I didn't see the authoritative figure who controlled everything. I saw a broken man who'd gambled everything on the wrong priorities, and lost. "I don't know if we'll ever be a family again," I said slowly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you, but I'm not going to destroy you further. Keep trying to fix your mess. Take care of Mom. And Daniel, finish your degree if you can figure out how. Just don't ever ask me to sacrifice for it again." "Is there any chance?" Richard started, but I held up my hand. "No," I said firmly. "There's no going back. You made your choices. I'm making mine. My choice is to build the life I always wanted, the one you tried to sell off." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his presence solid and reassuring. "We're done," I said, not taking my eyes off my father. "They were just leaving." Daniel nodded, wiping his face one more time. "Thank you for listening, Bella. I'll let you get back to work." Richard clutched the tools I'd returned to him. No, the ones he'd returned to me. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. He just nodded and turned toward the door. "Wait," I said. They both stopped. Richard looked back, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Take care of yourselves," I said, "and maybe think about who you want to be instead of who you think you should be." They left. Thomas closed the door behind them and put a hand on my shoulder. "That took strength," he said. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the encounter settling on me. I don't know what it took. I just know I couldn't carry their burden anymore. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work with an intensity I'd never known. The apartment above Thomas's workshop became my home. The workshop itself became my world. I finished my first guitar using the Brazilian rosewood, a masterpiece that took my breath away when I strung it for the first time. The sound was pure, resonant, alive. Thomas stood beside me when I played the first notes, tears in his eyes. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said simply. I heard through the grapevine that my family was slowly picking up the pieces. Richard had indeed taken a second job and was making payments on the mortgage. Daniel was still working as a barista, but had enrolled in night classes at a community college, trying to find a more affordable path to his degree. My mother had started working full-time again. They were learning, painfully, to live without using me as their safety net. I didn't reach out. and they respected that boundary. But every few weeks, I'd find a small envelope slipped under the workshop door. Inside would be a check, usually for $200 or $300, with a note in my father's handwriting. Not to repay you, just because you deserve better than what I gave you. I never cashed the checks. I kept them in a box, a reminder of the price of redemption and the long road of atonement. 1 year later, I was invited to showcase my work at a prestigious Lutherie exhibition. 3 of my guitars were selected for display, including the Brazilian rosewood piece. The night of the opening, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by master craftsmen and collectors. Thomas was beside me, beaming with pride. "Isabella," someone called. I turned. It was Daniel. He was there with my mother. They looked nervous, out of place among the well-dressed crowd. "We saw the announcement in the newspaper," Margaret said, her voice tentative. "We wanted to see your work." "I didn't invite you," I said, though not unkindly. "I know," Daniel said. "We weren't sure if we should come. But Mom thought—" He trailed off. I looked at them. These people who had once been my whole world, and who had betrayed me so completely. But I also saw the changes. Daniel had lost the entitled edge. He looked tired, but genuine. My mother seemed smaller, more uncertain, but there was something softer in her eyes. "You can stay," I said finally, "but just to look. Don't expect anything else." They nodded, grateful. They walked through the exhibit, stopping at each of my pieces. I watched my mother's hand hover over the Brazilian rosewood guitar, not quite touching it, as if afraid she didn't have the right. "This is extraordinary," she whispered. "You built this?" "I did," I said. "With the wood you thought was just scrap lumber." She flinched but didn't look away. "I'm so sorry, Isabella." "I know," I said, "and I'm working on forgiving you. But it's going to take time." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "We understand. We just wanted you to know we're trying to be better." "Where's Dad?" I asked, surprising myself. "He's in the parking lot," Daniel said. "He didn't think he should come in. He didn't think you'd want to see him." I considered this. Part of me wanted to leave him out there, to let him suffer in exile. But another part, the part that had been building and creating instead of destroying, felt something shift. "Tell him he can come in," I said. "Just to look." Daniel's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" I confirmed. "But Thomas stays with me, and if he starts making this about him, he leaves." Daniel practically ran outside. A few minutes later, Richard appeared. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He approached slowly, as if walking on sacred ground. "Isabella," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't expect he couldn't finish. I didn't respond, just gestured toward my work. He moved through the exhibit like a man in a museum, studying each piece with an intensity I'd never seen from him before. When he reached the Brazilian rosewood guitar, he stopped. His hand reached out, then pulled back. "May I?" he asked, looking at me. I nodded. He gently ran his fingers along the curve of the body, traced the inlay work, examined the precision of the joinery. "This is—" he started, then stopped. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's what you sold," I said quietly, or tried to. He nodded, unable to look at me. "I was a fool, Isabella. I was so focused on money and status and what I thought success looked like that I couldn't see the real success standing right in front of me. I destroyed the most valuable thing in my life." He paused. "My daughter. For something that didn't matter." The gallery around us continued to buzz with conversation, but in our small circle there was only silence. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I know I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I destroyed, and I see what you built despite me. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, truly sorry." I looked at this man, my father, who had caused me so much pain, but I also saw something I'd never expected to see: genuine remorse. Not the performative apology of someone trying to manipulate, but the broken confession of someone who finally understood what they'd lost. "I don't know if we'll ever have what we could have had," I said carefully. "You took something from me that I can't get back. Not the tools, but the belief that my family had my back." He nodded, tears streaming down his face now. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. For your mother, for Daniel, and for myself. I'm in therapy. I'm learning about why I did what I did, about the pressure I put on myself and on all of you. It doesn't excuse anything, but I'm trying to understand so I can change." "Therapy?" I echoed, genuinely surprised. "Yes," he said, almost defensively. "Your mother insisted. Said if I wanted to keep my family, I needed to figure out why I kept destroying it. I felt something crack inside me, not breaking but shifting. This wasn't the father I'd known. This was someone trying, however imperfectly, to grow." "That's good," I said finally. "Keep doing that." He nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. "Does this mean I understand the question he wasn't asking?" "I don't know what this means, Dad, but it means I'm willing to see where it goes. Baby steps." He exhaled, relief washing over his features. "Baby steps," he repeated. "I can do baby steps." The evening continued. My family stayed at the edges, respectful of my space but present. Thomas stayed close, my guardian and protector, but I could see him relaxing slightly, seeing that I was okay. Near the end of the night, a distinguished older gentleman approached my Brazilian rosewood guitar. He studied it for a long time, then turned to me. "You're the luthier?" he asked. "I am," I confirmed. "Remarkable work," he said. "Truly exceptional. The voicing is perfect. The craftsmanship is museum quality." "How much?" I blinked. "I'm sorry? How much for this piece? I'm prepared to make a very generous offer." I looked at Thomas. He gave me an encouraging nod. The guitar was priced at $25,000, more than I'd ever asked for a piece before. $50,000, the gentleman said before I could answer. "I'll write you a check tonight." "$50,000? I repeated, certain I'd misheard. "It's worth twice that," he said. "But I'm hoping you'll agree to build me 2 more pieces in the same style. I'll pay in advance." My father, standing nearby, made a small choking sound. $50,000. For one guitar. More than 1/3 of what he desperately tried to scrape together by selling my entire workshop. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I accepted the offer, shook the gentleman's hand, and watched him write the check. When he left, my family approached. "Isabella," my mother said, her voice full of wonder. "Did that just happen?" "It did," I confirmed, still somewhat in shock myself. "That's incredible," Daniel said, genuine pride in his voice. "You did that. You built something worth that much." I looked at Richard. He was staring at the check in my hand, but not with greed or calculation. He looked devastated. "That's what I tried to sell for peanuts," he whispered. "That's what I couldn't see." "Yes," I said simply. We stood there in silence, the weight of lost opportunities hanging between us. Finally, my father spoke again. "I'm proud of you, Isabella," he said. "I know I have no right to say that after everything I've done, but I am. You built this incredible career, this amazing talent, despite having me as a father. You did this in spite of me, not because of me, and I'm so proud." It was the first time he'd ever said those words to me, the first time he'd acknowledged my work as legitimate, as valuable, as worthy. I felt tears prickling at my eyes. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, not pushing for more. The evening wound down. My family prepared to leave. Before they went, my mother hugged me tentatively. I stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed into it. "I love you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I never stopped, even when I failed you." "I know, Mom," I said. "I'm working on getting past it. That's all I can ask," she replied. Daniel gave me an awkward wave, then hesitated. "Can I hug you too?" he asked. I nodded. He wrapped his arms around me, and I felt him shake slightly. "I'm sorry I was such a terrible brother," he murmured. "I'm going to do better." "I believe you're trying," I said. "Keep trying." Richard was last. He stood before me, hands at his sides, not presuming anything. I stuck out my hand. He looked at it, then at me, then carefully shook it. "It's a start," I said. "It's more than I deserve," he replied. They left. Thomas locked up the gallery, and we walked to his truck. "You handled that well," he said. "I don't know if I handled it at all," I admitted. "I just didn't want to carry the anger anymore. It was too heavy." "That's wisdom," he said. "Real wisdom." We drove back to the workshop in comfortable silence. When we arrived, I climbed the stairs to my apartment and sat by the window, looking out over the moonlit yard. The check for $50,000 sat on the table beside me. My grandfather's tools were arranged on a shelf, cleaned and honored. My life was my own now, built by my own hands, on my own terms. I thought about my family, broken and trying to rebuild. I thought about forgiveness, and whether it was something I owed them or something I needed for myself. I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in my life, I had space to figure it out. No one was demanding anything from me. No one was taking what I'd built. I was free. 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from my father. Inside was another check, this one for $500, and a letter written in his careful handwriting. "Dear Isabella, I know you don't cash these checks. Your mother told me she saw them in a box when she helped Thomas move some supplies. I understand why you keep them. They're not enough. They'll never be enough. But I want you to know I'm still trying. I've been in therapy for 8 months now. I've learned that I saw my children as extensions of myself, as proof of my own success or failure. When you chose a path I didn't understand, I felt like you were rejecting me. I couldn't separate your success from my ego. I'm learning to see you as your own person now, with your own dreams and your own incredible talents. I'm learning that loving my children means supporting who they are, not who I want them to be. Daniel is doing well. He's almost finished with his associate's degree and is thinking about becoming a paralegal instead of a lawyer. He seems happier, more grounded. He talks about you often, about how hard you work and how talented you are. Your mother and I are doing better too. We've started going to couples therapy. We're learning to communicate, to share burdens instead of hiding them. We're learning to be partners instead of co-conspirators in our own dysfunction. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I don't expect anything from you at all. I just wanted you to know that the work you did, the courage you showed in walking away and building your own life, it saved all of us. You showed us what real strength looks like. Not the false strength of control and dominance, but the true strength of knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it. I love you, Isabella. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. Always sorry. Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Then I carefully folded it and put it in the box with the checks. I sat down and pulled out a piece of paper. "Dear Dad," I wrote, then stopped. I sat there for a long time, pen hovering over paper, trying to find the right words. Finally, I continued. "I got your letter. Thank you for being honest about your journey. I'm glad you're getting help and that you're learning to see things differently. I want you to know that I'm doing well. Really well. My business is growing. Thomas is talking about making me a partner in the workshop. I have more commissions than I can handle. I'm building a life I'm proud of. I'm also working on healing. I've started therapy too, trying to process everything that happened and figure out how to move forward. It's hard work, but it's important work. I'm not ready for regular family dinners or holidays together. I'm not ready to pretend everything is okay, but I'm willing to keep this door open a crack. Your letters mean something. Your efforts mean something. They don't erase the past, but they're building something new. Keep working on yourself. Keep being honest. Keep trying. And maybe someday we'll find a new kind of relationship. Not the one we lost, but something different. Something real. Love. Isabella." I sealed the letter and addressed it. The next morning I mailed it. 3 years passed. My relationship with my family slowly, carefully rebuilt itself. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, because that relationship had been broken at its foundation. This was something new, built on honesty and boundaries, and mutual respect. I saw them once a month for coffee. Daniel and I occasionally grabbed lunch. He'd graduated with his associate's degree and was working as a paralegal, genuinely happy in his work. My mother and I talked on the phone weekly, careful conversations that slowly deepened. My father and I had the most complicated relationship. We met quarterly, usually at the workshop. He'd ask to see my latest projects, and I'd show him. He learned to ask questions instead of making pronouncements. He learned to listen. One day, 5 years after that terrible birthday, I invited my family to the workshop for a special occasion. I'd completed a commission for a famous musician, a guitar that would be played in concert halls around the world. It was the culmination of everything I'd learned, every skill I'd honed, every piece of my grandfather's wisdom I'd absorbed. They arrived together, nervous and respectful. I led them to the workshop where the guitar sat on a display stand, lit by soft overhead lights. It was a masterpiece. The wood grain caught the light like flowing water. The inlay work was intricate and perfect. The sound, when I'd tested it, had made me cry. "This is what I do," I said simply. "This is who I am." My father approached the guitar slowly. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward it. I nodded. He picked it up with reverence, cradling it like something precious and fragile. He ran his fingers over the wood, examined every joint, every detail. Then he did something I never expected. He started to cry. "Richard," my mother said, touching his arm. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm just seeing it, really seeing it for the first time. You're not just good at this, Isabella. You're a master. You're an artist. This is beyond anything I imagined." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry I couldn't see it before. I'm sorry I was so blind, so controlling, so stupid. I'm sorry I almost destroyed this." He gestured to the guitar, to the workshop, to me. I stepped forward and took the guitar from him, setting it carefully back on the stand. Then I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I hugged my father. He held me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder. "I love you," he whispered. "I'm so proud of you." "I love you too, Dad," I said. And I meant it. We stood there, my whole family, in the workshop I'd built with my own hands. The space that represented everything I'd fought for, everything I'd refused to give up. "This is my life," I said, pulling back and looking at all of them. "This is what I chose. It's not what you would have chosen for me, but it's mine. And I need you to respect that." "We do," my mother said. "We really do." Daniel nodded. "You were right all along, Bella. You knew who you were and what you wanted. I was just following a script someone else wrote. But you? You wrote your own. That's courage." We spent the rest of the afternoon in the workshop. I showed them my techniques, explained my process, let them hold the tools and feel the wood. I watched my father's face as he learned, really learned, about what I did. When they left that evening, something had shifted. We weren't a perfect family. We never would be. The scars from what had happened would always be there. But we were honest now. We were real. And that was something worth building on. 10 years after that terrible birthday, I stood in my own Lutherie studio, a beautiful space I'd designed and built myself. I had 3 apprentices now, young people hungry to learn the craft. Thomas had retired, leaving me his workshop and his blessing. I was a master luthier, known internationally for my work, and I was happy, truly, deeply happy. My family was at my studio's grand opening. All of them. My father, semi-retired now, spent his time volunteering and had become one of my biggest advocates, telling anyone who would listen about his incredibly talented daughter. My mother worked part-time and took art classes, finally pursuing her own passions. Daniel was a successful paralegal, married to a kind woman, and they had a baby on the way. They'd asked me to be the godmother. As I stood there, surrounded by the life I'd built, I thought about that terrible night when I'd packed my bags and walked away. I'd thought I was losing everything. Instead, I'd found myself. The workshop door opened, and a young woman walked in. She looked nervous, clutching a portfolio. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Isabella?" "I am," I confirmed. "I'm Maya," she said. "I heard you sometimes take on apprentices. I want to learn. I want to build instruments." I smiled, seeing my younger self in her eager eyes. "Come in," I said. "Let's talk about what you want to build. Because that's what it's really about. Not what anyone else wants for you. Not what's practical or expected. But what you want to build, with your own 2 hands." Maya followed me into the workshop, her eyes wide with wonder. And as I began to teach her, as I passed on the knowledge my grandfather had given me and Thomas had refined, I felt the circle complete. I'd been broken down and rebuilt. I'd lost everything and found more than I'd ever imagined. And now, I was helping someone else find their way. That's what it means to be free. Not to be unbroken, but to build something beautiful from the pieces. That's what it means to live under your own roof. The end.